So then, we are back with the modern understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, a refined and the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Itzayelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Yirmiyahu the prophet that was rejected by the nation of Israel. The prophet then is speaking of the time where then he was living during a section of the history that was roughly 700 years prior of the coming of the Messiah, promised by Moshe himself. He came from heaven. And then understanding this layer of understanding of this time after 2009, where then ended the 1,000 years of the seat. So then, let's try to understand what this means. As far as we can understand, this very precise understanding is related with Galah, or Revelation, the 20th chapter, where you have then obviously many sections of the facets of Nahashatan. Then you have the understanding regarding the 1,000 years given to the Messiah, and then the other 1,000 given to Nahashatan. Simply the 1,000 years of the seat is a period of time from 1009 to 2009, where then the holy cities were no more. We are yet studying these holy documents and understanding further regarding then Yirmiyahu the prophet is speaking very precisely that those cities laid waste for many centuries. This means the existing cities were available after the time of Yohanan. So then, since it's time of the restoration period, this means that the prophecies are known. Every section of the prophecies were then known at the time. They did not understand obviously the relationship of the future events of the geopolitical situations of the time as precisely as the Messiah saw during the time he was then in charge of the Holy of Holies. But then those layers of understanding, they were taught from generation to generation, and then 1009 the cities were laid waste. Then there was 1,000 years of the sea, to where you find the term New World Order. New World Order was a proper description of the time of the lack of the holy cities. Thus then the Bilderberg group, then obviously in the 50s, then came up with furtherance of this control of the world's market. But then the tracing back from where it started was precisely after 1009. So then, during this time of the seat, 800 years was granted to Great Britain, 200 years granted to America. They both had the leadership of the worldwide trade in what they thought was God. Then after 09 or 2009 or 7009 per the Creator's calendar, then we find ourselves during this section of time where then the cities of the Messiah are returning. However, there is an extra understanding of the original manuscripts, because we are not talking about the church. Congregations are then apart. We are speaking the obligations of the Torah, the obligations of the holy instructions as per the description of the Messiah himself, where then he said the authority was given to him in heaven and earth, go therefore and form holy cities, as per the instructions of Moshe the prophet. So then there is a definite relationship with the holy cities returning and the congregations. So then let's try to understand. These layers of understanding are not related of making congregations holy cities. It's not the point. But there is then the obligation of the original people, those who are enlightened and directed by the Messiah, so they can resume the second holy services. Congregations, they have a relationship of their own, and they can come to the cities and then wait for answers. It's very simple. So the congregations, they stay where they are at, other than learning further the layers of the prophetic. So then we find not only this, but then the world as the layer of the Gentiles. Then we find ourselves studying further and understanding then what Yirmiyahu the prophet said in chapter 1:8. He said very precisely, not only in 1:8, but he said also in the 61st chapter, where then sections of the Gentiles were granted as servicing the Messiah. This was during the time of the language of Yirmiyahu the prophet. It was 700 years roughly before the completion of the spring feast. So then we have to understand, is more than 2,700 years ago, then Yirmiyahu described this very particular section, where then he described then Gentiles taking care of the service land around tabernacling. Unheard of back then. But it was an honor for any of the foreigners becoming part of the holy instructions. But then we are not going to be obedient to the instructions themselves, because Gentiles, they have congregations, and congregations are not holy cities. But those people from the holy cities, enlightened by the Messiah, those must be law-abiding people. But then the Messiah enables them to do so. So then we find ourselves then understanding, for instance, then the layer of the Gentiles as service people. So then, the 60th chapter of Galah, Revelation. What do we understand of Revelation, the 60th chapter? Explains then, obviously, the Messiah himself making mention of those testifiers on behalf of the Messiah, making testimonies. The Hebrews, they won't be making testimonies on behalf of the Messiah. They're going to function. They're going to be functioning in the 7 spirits of Elohim, 7 functions. That's why there are no gifts of the Spirit. There are functions of the Spirit, and those are granted only to those of the original Abrahamic lineage, or then Abrahamic covenant. And then we understand our relationship as congregations before the holy cities. So it's a very simple understanding. However, the Gentiles were included. And when the Gentiles are included, then the system must be decentralized. So then the Ishmaelites receive precisely as King Ishmael started his caravans. He was responsible for trade of the lineage of Ibrahim. And precisely the anointing of Ibrahim, that was divided in 2 sons. The first son, Ishmael, he was a king, and he started his caravan company. Then it was Yitzhak, responsible for tabernacling. So then, precisely as it was, because the restoration of the entire anointing under the leadership of the Creator himself, via his son, obviously. So then, there are the steps of formation, so then we can understand Ezekiel the 37th chapter, where then you understand the stick of authority of Ishmael and the stick of authority of Yitzhak. So then, how is then the Creator going to restore the stick of authority of Ishmael? Very simple. Firstly, comes then the decentralization of the banking system or the riches. So then people can give power to the government. Precisely what then those people dealing with Ishmael's caravans, they were doing. They were empowering then the kingdoms after they had taken care of trade. This is what the Creator then is doing it. And then not only this, but there are steps of formation. So let's understand what come out and did come out this morning, where then there was a very special interview of the point of view of the Soviets regarding then the West, and then the system or the monetary system of the West, known as then obviously USD. A type of a system where then it was granted only roughly 200 years, or then the last 200 years of the 1000. That's why then the USD is very badly depreciated, because not only must it be depreciated further until the United States retrieves and then take care of their own country, reserving their talents, reserving their country, reserving their culture, and let China, Soviet Union, and Africa do their work. So then, let's understand from the viewpoint of the designers, how is the Creator going to resume the work with the kingdom of the East, North, and South, so then He can give the stick of authority back to the Ishmaelites? Because truly the objective is this, having then the stick of authority of Ishmael restored, the stick of authority of Yitzhak restored via the holy cities. So there are a couple of understandings at the same time. You have the understanding of tabernacling, the sons of Yitzhak, then came from the lineage of the Messiah, doing precisely what's on the Torah, because then the holy cities are going to wait for the autumn feast. So the Messiah is not coming at any moment. He's coming at a specific time in a system where then we begin our quest understanding. Tabernacling comes from a form of a structure where you can say a system, where then times and the seasons must be respected. At the moment, the first holy city is on the land of Cush. The Greco and the Roman translations did omit the word Cush because they did not understand the content and the context based from speaking of tabernacling outside of Jerusalem during a time where it is more than 2,700 years ago. But if you study the original manuscripts, you will find land of Cush. You find then the first holy city on the land of Cush of the past, known today in the modern days as Northern Sudan. That's where the first tabernacle service of the second tabernacle services then must start. Not only this, but then the south part, or beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, then the prophet Yeshayahu mentioned a woe to the land beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. Because there is a section down there with lots of riches, because we are speaking of the Gentile level of this southern land. How these situations can be then linked up? Very simple. We stick with the authority of the Ishmaelites at the moment. We have to come up with a roadmap where we understand until this stick is granted. At the moment, we understand BRICS is the combination of a few countries where then the system of virtual monetary value of transactions then is generated. You find Brazil, you find Soviet Union, you find in India, you find in China, and you find in South Africa. These are then the main countries that are going to initiate the system of the virtual internet financial system, decentralized financial system. So then, there was the interview this morning. Is it feasible reconstituting the existing system of the United States? No, because their time has expired. There is no more time. It was granted the last 200 years and then ended in 2009. There is no way of refurbishing the USD. But the United States must retrieve from the world as Great Britain retrieved themselves from the United States when was the time. Thus the independence of the United States was the removal of the Great Britain, or the imperialism of Great Britain from the United States. The same way the United States then retrieves from the world system, so then China, Soviet Union, and Africa can do their work. At the moment, we find ourselves then understanding what it means then dragon marked. So the concept of restoring the stick of authority of Ishmael is then purely trade from a preset set of events or flow of events so that nations can become at peace. What can we understand? We understand Dragon Mart came from China. Dragon Mart is already in Dubai, and Dragon Mart is already in Cancun. Other Dragon Marts must be then constructed, obviously in South Pacific, Australia, obviously in South Atlantic, then South Brazil. or then north of Canada, where then the northwest route, because of the climate change, is then melting the ice, making then navigable the northwest route, linking up already the northern Canada with the Soviet Union. Then you find India, and then you find South Africa. Those are then the main points where we can definitely establish the physical areas of the dragon, where then he makes available products with a reasonable price so nations can rebuild. Because the Creator is showing what He's doing with this earth after its rebuilding. The other section is then, when those physical sections of Dragon Mart is then established, then we find ourselves understanding the virtual monetary system, or decentralizing the banking system of the world. So then nations, the individuals of nations, they have the power, and the governments simply they gather taxes from the work of the individuals, making precisely as it was during the time of Ishmael. That's precisely what's coming. So then, not only this, but what is the next step? In September of this year, there is then a visit in the Soviet Union, where then the banking of the BRICS must be then further refined. We find then yesterday then the army and then the military forces of China rejoining with the Soviet Union for further exercises and maneuvers. Then not only this, but then the fortification of these armies and these militaries is for the reason of protecting the new virtual system as the nations they decentralize themselves. 2 years ago, couple of years ago, came out a report from IMF, International Monetary Fund, where then not even IMF said, but even the Prime Minister of Israel mentioned 5 years, then the economy of the United States would ruin if they would not take proper measures of straightening it out. But he can't, because this report was during the time of the deceit. This report was regarding the time of the deceit. However, it was spoken after 2009, because we are in 13. But then we find ourselves in the very edge of the time 09-10, where then the time had expired. So the United States has no choice. They have to remove themselves from the entire world, get away from any kind of conflict, and let then the Soviet Union do their work. Let the new military power establish itself and providing safer way of making and doing trade. What can we understand of the virtual system? It's very simple. Understandably, the entire Pacific is already lined up with China. The entire Pacific. We in the West, we are deprived from news from the Pacific. How often do you hear the news from the Pacific? How often do you hear news of Singapore, Malaysia, or Macau, or then Solomon Islands, New Zealand, Australia? It's nearly unheard of, making then the West ignorant of the understanding of the time of the restoration period coming from the Pacific until it reaches the West. The link is there is already in Mexico, in Cancun, then the Dragon Mart, becoming the distribution center of the Central Americas. Only rests then obviously the understanding of then the northern section of America and the southern section of America. So then the world is changing very fast. So then United States and Canada not as much because they are further advancing themselves, but then they have strong links with Great Britain because the 10 plus 5 realms yet directed by Great Britain, these are then from a system where they won't be able to last for very long. Not only this, but the Eurozone must be also broken, because then Daniel mentioned nations will try to come together and adhere to each other, and they would not. So it must be broken. So then China has the sole power regarding the trade of the end. Because later then, during the second transition, because we are experiencing the first transition, the time of deceit, back in the time of precision, as it was during the time of the holy cities. Then there is a second transition where then the power of trade from China continues, but then it is regulated via the crude or petroleum, where then the Arabs or the sons of Ishmael, they have the most of it. Thus they control then the market via the petroleum. Prior of this time, we are yet in initiation of this system, where then nations are coming together in September and they're going to restart talks of the new virtual system. United States is out of it. They are not part of it. So then either the United States retrieves via friendly means or unfriendly means, because the prophecies are very explicit from the original manuscripts, from the Itzaelic lineage, not the Greco-Roman. Whosoever reads the Greco and the Roman translation does not understand the layers of the prophetic, lacking obviously knowledge of the entire Pacific, and we are experiencing then the very initiation of this virtual system. So then we find ourselves studying even further and understanding further the importance of tabernacling from the viewpoint of tabernacling, but then acting as congregations. During this time then, what was going to be then the answers regarding the question? Are the nations then prepared for the breakage of the USD? What is it going to be like when they discover the next day USD has failed? Can a president of a country prepare the country for the destruction or then the devaluation of the USD? What are the investments? Can a leader of a country have an inventory of those investments of the entire country, where they can evaluate the danger of not existing anymore USD at some point in the future, very near future? What is it going to be like those investors? Can they recuperate some of the lost areas of their investments? And how are they going to replace the USD with? So then, the main understanding of this point that we must be very acquainted with is what China did some time ago, linking up with Switzerland. Switzerland, they have multinational banking system, one of the richest of Europe, where then China has a direct relation with them. You know what this means? That the banking system is already finding in China this USD replacement. So they understand in the very near future, roughly 30 months, the USD is going to devalue. Thus far, it is a simple piece of paper because it's not backed up by gold anymore. So Switzerland, very wisely, they have linked up themselves with China, so then when the USD breaks, they have a link with China. And doing this further, then comes the virtual monetary systems of nations. It's very simple. The calculation is the average gold price. Gold was used as a standard of value of the central bank regarding with paper money. So then, how can a person understand the virtual? Study Bitcoin.org. Study the principles of virtual monetary systems. And try to understand the concept. It is decentralized, but then it is an international system. No nation can control the Chinese system. It is decentralized. Let's evaluate further. The average price of the gold price of China, making the average price of the gold with yen or then yuan of China, gives you a value. Average price of an ounce of gold gives you a number in yuan, Chinese yuan. This number, there is then a synchronism with the value, for instance, in Brazil of real. This synchronism gives you then an exchange for a certain value in real. Then the Brazilian government could generate a coin, a virtual coin. For instance, a regular coin with R for real and V as virtual. And then the government monitors the generation of these RVs. So then nations can understand and copy from each other. So then, when the Brazilians then they decide to get more of those RVs, they purchase with the paper money. From the Central Bank of Brazil, they have paper money. But then the value of the RV is the average price of the Chinese gold. So there is an exchange done. Then as they purchase the RVs, they store in their computers. Thus then provides a way when then USD fails, then the nation is already linked up with China and then using the standard of gold as a means of protecting the RV. So then, with these, later then, we already understand. When this point then comes, then the physical areas of Dragon Mart is already then in Australia, South Africa, India, South Brazil, North America. So then comes only the downloading of the Chinese system in your computer, where then you are going to start making investments not in companies. You invest directly on a product. So let's say you are familiar with eBay. You select any product you want, but then you have to project based upon infrastructure. What is the main objective of the G20? Infrastructure and generation of jobs and mining. The very basics of human living. So then you receive there thousands upon thousands of items where you have to project how many countries are going to buy certain products. Let's say infrastructure relates with constructions of homes, buildings. What can you understand? For instance, electricity, you understand cables, you understand wires. And there is a specific quality of wire that you can think of a certain company where you can invest in this product. And depending upon how much you invest and how many times those products are purchased in a span of 30 days, then based upon what you invest, you get a tiny portion of it, of these investments, but always positive. But then depends upon your wisdom in what countries would purchase this product. Multiply by 100,000, 900,000 other products, then you get a nice paycheck at the end of the month. But these exchanges and transactions are done instantly via the computer. The government does not read what you are doing because the system is overseas. But then the way the government can deduct taxes is via the tracking number of the freighters. That's when you get then detected what you do with your earnings, so then the government can charge you taxes. So then a deal with the government and freighters must be via the tracking numbers. Then the Secret Service then can understand what's going on, what is being purchased, what is then related with these products, part numbers, descriptions, prices, and taxation instantly. When you use the switch and you push enter, then when it prints, instantly the government must receive its taxation. So then the Secret Services, they have absolutely control of what kinds of items people are purchasing, helping further then the system become cleaner. So then, these gives us then the initiation of the new worldwide virtual monetary system. It's not using the yen or the yuan from China. It is instant conversion of the price of the yen or the yuan, and then you make your value instantly given you. As you can read, for instance, in Bitcoin, there are thousands of stores dealing with Bitcoin. You purchase the product via Bitcoin, no longer with USD. So when you hear direct trade, it is the simple fact of no more USD. Nations are no longer bound by a type of system that is absolutely failed. This brings us to a new level of understanding, because then the people, they have the power. The governments, they can't print more money in exchange for control. Has to have a real production, has to have a real control of these investments, so then it stays always in the positive, because when the numbers, they go to the negative, the computer halts. The computer seizes up, because there is no way of continuation of transactions. Thus then, when we understand what Daniel said, Daniel, then the 12th chapter, knowledge at the end of the time of the seat would increase. But he was a tradesperson. He used to do trade for many kings. He was an expert in doing trades for the kings he worked under. From a viewpoint of a tradesperson, understanding then high knowledge with a new decentralized system to give then the stick of authority back to the Ishmaelites must be decentralized. Thus then, each nation are obligated, nearly, of having a virtual system of their own. Or when the system comes at once, they are obligated then to do the purchasing of yuan, and only God knows what price China is going to ask for. Because the new system generates then the obligation of having these conversions done first prior of purchases. And they can ask for the yuan, for instance, a yuan 5 reals. Do you understand then the danger of waiting until? But if we make our RV at the moment, then we already get ourselves in line and trained for the next 30 months. When it does take place, then the country is already prepared. Thus far, related with the September visit in the Soviet Union, the G20, if you do a research in the computer, the Brazilian government has no objective. What can Brazil do in the G20 in September in the Soviet Union? What are the many areas related with helping China developing themselves even further as far as becoming the factory of the world? Because no nation can compete with China. So then, based from these, what would be the best for Brazil, for instance? Obviously, having mining done in northern Brazil in a way that is absolutely clean and control the workers going on around. Make sure certain areas, when they begin to extract the minerals, when they are done with, then it's covered, and then obviously the vegetation must be returned to its condition. And then extracting these materials, smeltering them, and sending them to China. This truly is the deal. But then comes the government coming up with a balance of distribution center with products inexpensive versus what then the industry of Brazil can contribute. So it takes a balance where then they have to evaluate how they should go forward with it, because there is no competition with China. The Heavenly Plan provides China with absolutely forward motion, providing then those items related with reconstructing their countries. No other country can compete with them. So becoming a distribution center, such as then Australia, is extremely advantageous. And having ourselves in Brazil, for instance, in South America, is very advantageous, because provides instantly thousands of jobs of constructions and more than thousands of jobs then of logistics. The situation is so important, and the volume of work is so absolutely enormous. When the system becomes available, if the country is not prepared, they won't be able to deal with so many orders at the same time. A system decentralized causes the government not to know what's coming in the box. Only when it gets to those centers, let's say, in Brazil, when you purchase overseas, comes then to a central location, either north, central, or south. Then they have to go through these packages, okay? Generates then a lot of work. But when the system becomes worldwide, they won't be able then to give the demand so fast. Firstly, because then the government does not know what's in the package. The system used is virtual. It does not have a link with the central bank. That's the first problem. The second problem, the government won't have then the tracking system of the freighters. That's the second problem. So they don't know what's coming in the box. But then making a legal purchase via a foreign system provides you with a contract from yourself, the freighter, and the distributor, obligating then the freighters to deliver the package at your home. So then when it goes to the distribution center for evaluation, when it goes to the center in Brazil, how are they going to cope with sometimes 10 airplanes waiting to unload, then 10 ships waiting to be unloaded, 10 trucks waiting outside, and then firms ordering these wanting the packages? It's going to be chaos. Our government is not yet suited. They are not prepared for the number of volume. That's why then when it comes from China or then the nearest distribution center, it must be done instantly. So then the government knows from the freighters the tracking number and what's coming in the box. What it takes is only a set of many lines of X-rays, so then technicians can stand in the front of the computer while the X-ray scans the boxes, so then they can do the security. So then imagine so many depots that would have to be constructed. How many upgradation of ports and airports for this demand of aircrafts and ships and then trains and then trucks coming at the same time. In each of them they have a legal, a binding contract with the freighters, and the boxes must be delivered. Let's say, and then Brazil comes around, because we don't have enough space in our warehouse. You know what those people are going to say? F you. I don't care if you have space or not. I have a contract with the freighters and I want my box. They're going to say, F you, F the government, F the president, I want my box. So then you understand what F means, don't you? So the president won't have any more power. Either they have the system absolutely nicely organized and deliver their packages, or the government has to get out of there and then have it vacant for somebody else to take over and make those depots places where the boxes are then obviously going through security real fast, and then delivered must be done. Or then causes trouble with the distributor and then the freighters because they have a binding contract. And the government, the Brazilian government, can't hold them back. If you order a package that is a next day air, you want your package from the distribution center next day air to your home. That's why you paid the price for the next day air. If this box stays with the government's depot more than a day, then you don't receive next day air, do you? Then it's going to have a trouble with the government. So the government lost. They lost. The only situation they can come up with is understanding this time of the end and providing upgradation of ports, upgradation of distribution centers, where there are more security, more X-rays, more areas for unloading of products. So then the security is done instantly, and then the package is released for delivery, thus honoring the contract with the distributor. Please stay tuned, much more coming up.